Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Fish Bytes, the Miami Herald's Miami Marlins podcast. I'm Jordan McPherson. He's Andre Fernandez. The countdown is at 29 games left, Andre.
29. That's true. It's all everybody's around 27, 28, 29. If you're watching this Marlins season, it feels like far too many because every day and you have the front row seat. I mean, you just sat there through 3 in Atlanta where it was one. You get 1 run each. What does Spider-Man say in Family Guy? Everybody gets 1. Well, no, they only get 1. Others get more, but they only get 1 apparently.
Yep, Marlins only get 1, and that third game, we made it through 8. We were 8 for 8 in Atlanta without having to deal with weather. The last game, 5 innings in, Mother Nature decides to unleash everything and turn a game that was only 3 hours if you exclude the weather delay into a 5-hour marathon. So having to sit through in addition to the doldrums of what's happening on the field, having to sit through the doldrums of a weather delay to cap all that off was, well, I think I saw more action during the rain delay anyway. So maybe that was for the better.
I hope you're finding road trips entertaining for other reasons because, and look, it's not even people might think, oh, if you're, don't cheer for your team. It's not even that. I think it's just brutal baseball sometimes that you're watching.
Yeah,
at least if it was and
it's not just the fact that it's
competitive, more competitive losing, right?
Yeah, it's almost the same story every single time.
Exactly.
And it's basically, hey, the opponent scored 3 runs. Okay, time to start writing the loss. Hey, the opponent scored 2 runs. I think it's safe to start writing the loss. And even there's the games where Sandy Alcantara is on the mound. Even when they get the 1 run, it still only feels like a 50-50 shot. They're going to be able to come away with it.
Yeah,
it's a matter of finding the differences.
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember when I was on there and doing it, day to day. When Joe was there day to day and Clark Spencer was there day to day. I mean, in 2018, we joked. We later became like a running joke between us, but that thing where you're in the 4th or 5th inning and a Marlin finally gets a hit and you all exhale. It was serious, and we're back to that. So we should not be back to that, and that's the sad part of this season is that all this has happened. But you, my friend, are detailing that pretty good for those of you listening to this now, on a Tuesday morning or whenever. By this time it should be on the Miami Herald website. Check out Jordan's story where he details where this thing went sideways, where this thing went off the tracks, and why. And pretty simple answer. They, the engines of this lineup, as we know, both went, they went down for a while, especially the main engine guy who's nicknamed just like a musical genre.
But I mean, they
without
traded
him, but there's more to it than that. The big bats in turn haven't been able to really pick it up without him, and that's obviously it has been the very disappointing part of the season for one reason or another. And you take it from there. We talk about. Let's start, I guess, with Jorge Soler was on a pretty good pace. I even forgot about that. That Jorge Soler was on a pretty good pace before he got hurt, and he just hasn't been able to play.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, it all to me starts with June 28th, the day that Jazz Chisholm Jr. left with the lower back injury against the Cardinals that ultimately became a stress fracture in his lower back. The next day, June 29th, Jorge Soler was a late scratch from the lineup with what was first pelvis inflammation that he missed a good chunk of time for, then came back for 5 games and then hasn't been back since with lower back spasms. If you look at where the Marlins were on June 28th or after June 28th, the June 28th game, Jazz led the Marlins with 14 home runs and 45 RBI. Jorge Soler was second in home runs with 13 and was third with 34 RBI, one behind Garrett Cooper, who had 35 at that point. And that was 73 games into the season. The Marlins had a respectable offense through those first 73 games. 244 batting average, 14th in the league. 706 OPS, 16th in the league. 80 home runs, 14th in the league. All averaging 4.5 runs a game, give or take. I mean, middle of the road offensive numbers, but when you look at what the starting rotation is, that keeps you competitive.
Well, and I was going to say, and where were they in the standings around that time, give or take a day or two?
No, again,
about
they were
two back of the wild card, more or less.
Yeah, they were hovering around. They were in the thick of the playoff race throughout there, and then that kept going a little bit after both of them went down. But if you look at the 60 games overall as a whole, since both of them went down since that June 28th game when they were both in the lineup together for the last time, 60 games. Marlins have scored 152 total runs. That's averaging 2.5 runs a game, so down 2 runs per game, complete total from what they were doing the first 73 through these last 60. No MLB team has had a stretch of 60 games averaging this amount per game or less since the 1971 San Diego Padres. 1971, guys. That's 51 years.
I'm not that old. I wasn't born yet.
Yeah, not a make Andre feel old moment. Yay, I finally did it.
Yes.
And then you look through just the rest of their stats and comparing them to the rest of the league this season. Marlins batting average dropped from 244 in those first 73 to now a 216 batting average. They're just hovering over the Mendoza line as a team over the last 10 weeks.
For kicks and giggles, to not say a dirty word, I looked up what the 71 Padres finished, 61 and 100.
Marlins are hovering around there. Marlins are have 55 wins right now. So let's see what happens there. So a few other stats. 583 team OPS over this 60-game stretch. MLB worst over that time. Next closest is the LA Angels at 618. They have only 36 home runs over these 60 games. And surprise, surprise, MLB worst. Detroit Tigers with 39 have the second fewest. And the big picture for it, their record over these 60 games, 22 and 38. Tied with the Texas Rangers for the third worst record in that stretch. Which, again, goes back to the fact that they have the pitching that on occasion can help them and keep them in the game despite this stretch of futility.
Because if you've watched these last 60 games, it feels like it could be even worse. But then you remember that every once in a while, Sandy will throw one of his gems and they'll win 2-1. Or, randomly they'll have a little bit more of an outburst one day and score 5, and it's just enough to edge by. But those have been few and far between. Even the Sandy starts aren't, foolproof because we've seen him be a little bit human the last few times out. I think 2 out of his last 3 haven't been that great. And, it's just it can't be this one-sided, obviously, like we know. And it really has derailed a season where if you look at them where they were in June after what we were talking about, you had the hope that maybe they'd be the Orioles right now. Maybe they're not square right in the playoff picture as been like they'd make it right now, but they'd be in the fight until late, like the Orioles.
It would make it interesting down the stretch. It would make
the Orioles
have a reason to watch with this.
Yeah, the Orioles now are either, depending on from now to when people hear this, maybe 2-3 back of the final wild card spot. That's where you kind of hope that they could sustain themselves and kind of be. And let's say they did do that, and let's say they did fall short. Maybe they fall short by 3-4 games, whatever. That's that step, though, that we were talking about at the beginning of the season as the progress of the overall big picture where, okay, we got a little closer to truly being a playoff team this year. But obviously that hasn't happened for everything that you just said primarily. And now you wonder, the future, what the future is going to look like in a lot of places for this team because clearly things haven't, worked very well. A few things have, but the ongoing problem with this team is offense. And can they fix it? How do you fix it? How fast can you possibly fix it? It's all the same questions we've been asking primarily we were asking coming in to this season, thinking that this would be the year where some of that would start to get cleared up a little bit. And despite the tease the first 3 months, it didn't happen.
Yeah, and just to touch back with the Orioles, heading into, as of the time of this recording, 3.5 back of Toronto for the last wild card spot, which they're facing Toronto right now, and also only 9.5 back of the Yankees for first place in the AL East after New York has had its own fall through since the All-Star break. But
look, this is like look at 2016. That's what the Marlins were in 2016. They were around, they were hanging around until it kind of felt even before what happened with Jose, they were until about mid-September-ish, where we are now, we're getting close to. It was still a possibility that maybe one last little run, maybe they could sneak in. and that was with one fewer wild card.
Yeah.
So, but you look at that team, and it's no comparison as far as the offense that team had. I mean, you look at the problem back then was flipped. You had less pitching, and now it's the other way around. So it's like you're still a one-sided franchise in that sense. It's just the other way around.
Yeah, and when you look back at the offense to go back to the bigger picture of it, once Soler and Jazz went down, the Marlins were basically consolidated down to 3 of their quote-unquote big boys to have to try to lead the offense. And by that, those 3, Garrett Cooper, Jesus Aguilar, Avisail Garcia. And how'd they do so far? Dre, do you remember when Garrett Cooper was hitting over 300?
Long time ago.
Yeah. So right at June 28th, he was hitting 315. Since then, 120, 14 for 117, a 472 OPS. Just 2 home runs, just 7 RBI over 37 games. Jesus Aguilar, who the Marlins DFA'd on August 26th, which was at the point where they were already out of the playoffs, and basically said, yeah, we have 3 guys here, Cooper, Aguilar, and Lewin Diaz, and they want to get Lewin Diaz reps at first base, see what they have in him. Aguilar, with no team control left, was the odd man out. But in that
Aguilar,
stretch,
who is now with those Orioles.
Yes, and I'm
thanks
honestly
to that move.
And I'm honestly rooting for Jesus Aguilar, and I'm honestly
glad for him.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping the Orioles make playoffs. Aguilar, for as much of the struggles he had on offense this year, he was one of those guys that the 3 years that he was here was one of those glue guys in that clubhouse, especially when you look back at the 2020 season when the outbreak happened. He was one of the new guys, but he was one of those guys who kept them together and kept them upbeat, kept them in the right state of mind during that stretch when they were basically down to bare bones. He was able to keep them in there. And again, remember last year he led the National League in RBI before he had a season-ending injury, and then Duvall overtook him. So he was a guy who for 2 years gave the Marlins what they needed. And then this year, that stretch before he got DFA'd was 213, 6 home runs, 18 ribbies over 48 games. And then Avisail Garcia, we discussed his struggles basically since the start of the season. But before going out with the hamstring strain on August 3rd, the 28 games when Jazz and Soler weren't in there, he was hitting 245. He was the best of the 3 big boys, and it's sad to say that looking at what that number was, that was the best of the 3. And when you only have one of those 3 who's doing anything, that pushed the pressure on basically everyone else, the guys who are supposed to be your complementary pieces, Joey Wendell, John Birdie, Miguel Rojas, Brian Anderson. You're now basically trying to say we need these guys to be our guys who score the runs, not our guys who drive in the runs, not the guys who are scoring the runs. And it's sort of basically putting that duality on them. And even that group, again, Wendell was hurt for a month. Brian Anderson was hurt for a month. Birdie missed a lot of time. Miguel Rojas is dealing with a wrist injury right now. And unlike a lot of these really good teams, and I'll just go to the Braves because the Marlins just faced them, when the Marlins had to bring young guys up, they didn't instantly create success like you see the Braves having right now with Michael Harris, like they're having with Vaughn Grissom, like they've had with basically every guy who's in their starting lineup right now when they came up and made their debuts.
This is nothing new.
It is nothing new, and it's also
their names are Ronald Acuna, their names are Ozzy Albies. Braves have been doing this for a while, and it's because of good development and good scouting, a good organization in place that can find that talent and then develop that talent and spot not just maybe good talent, no, talent that will make an immediate impact. And we were saying that I like calling it the pretend playoff year, the 60 game year. We were saying how far ahead Atlanta was. Here you go. Again, more evidence served up right there. I mean, look at these guys.
Yep.
I mean, again, but narrowing the focus to what you were talking about with Aguilar and Cooper, and I mean, to me, wish Aguilar the best, but I think you have found a good potential long-term guy in Lewin Diaz. I say continue the mini purge and find more young guys to put around him there. Maybe I'd find another option in the offseason to put there. I think it's time. I think in a few spots on this team, it's time to move on and time to maybe get younger and try to find some of that young talent. That's one spot for sure where around Lewin now. And then the same in the outfield. And then I know this is going to sort of transition us to the part that you also detailed how some of these guys like like Gerard Encarnacion and him, and Peyton Burdick and JJ Bleday are all getting their opportunities, but they're struggling as well. And why? Because again, this isn't an ideal spot. This isn't an ideal lineup to be in to get your quote unquote like first licks in the majors. You know what I mean? You'd like to take some pressure off these guys, and you just can't afford to because there's no support really in terms of like, protecting spots in the lineups. You don't have that big guy in front of you in the lineup or the big guy behind you in the lineup coming up, anything like that for the most part. And that's why you're seeing that's partially why you're seeing some of this. I mean, some of this could be also that these guys are still need time, may or may not pan out in some cases. But for argument's sake, I mean, just looking at it on the surface, it would be a lot better than thrusting them into one of the worst lineups in baseball right now.
Yeah, and again, they're basically forming the bulk of the lineup. If you look at it, when I look through everything since over the last 33 games, when basically this entire group of prospects, JJ Bleday, Peyton Bird, Gerard Encarnacion, Lewin Diaz, Charles LeBlanc, when they were all basically on the active roster, 29 of the past 33 games, at least 3 of them have been the starting lineup. 11 of the last 27 games, at least 4 of them have been the starting lineup. All 5 of them have been in the same lineup twice. And it's also not necessarily like Mattingly saying, yes, I need to be playing all these guys or picking who and who. This is all above his head. He told us on Saturday that his lineups are basically, he's making them as far as 5 days in advance so that the front office can see it and they can go, well, we need to see this guy a little bit more. We want to see this guy in this situation. We want to see this person. So it's to the point of basically, it's just all a matter of, okay, how many reps can we give these guys? How many times can we get the eyes on them? And by October 5th, front office can say, okay, we think we have enough of a sample to see to know what we have with this person.
And look, and this is where I'm just gonna get real about this, but that's where, and I love Don Mattingly, but who's running the team, and it's not him, not really. Yep. And not just in this aspect, but we saw it a few weeks ago when he said he didn't want to get. What was it? We're talking about lineup switches.
About pinch hitting in certain situations, right? Yeah, and he said, doesn't want to, and it's like he doesn't want to get. He says he flat out says he doesn't want to get in trouble, and it's like, geez, you're just minding the store, unfortunately, I hate that. It sucks to see him in that spot. And it's not just here. That's happening a lot in baseball now, where the manager is basically the field manager is basically just the middleman for the front office, the analytics department. Right. Joe Madden, who again got fired by the Angels, he said in the story about that Mark Tompkins at Tampa Bay Times wrote, basically saying that he's actually relieved that he's not managing anymore because it's basically it's just basically daycare duty at times where you're getting the orders from up top, you follow them, and then when they don't work out, you're the one taking the brunt of the wrath from the fan base and from the media because you're the face. You're the one who talks every day. You're the one who has to answer the questions when there may or may not be the decisions that you would have made if given the chance.
The manager is basically the White House spokesperson at this point. You know what I mean? They have to answer the questions. They have to come out there, and be asked one way or another, whatever the president has decided. And that's what it's become in baseball. It's very few, if any, left that are powerful enough managers, big name managers that really are calling important shots to that degree. And it's crazy how the game, it's funny how the game has changed, and it hasn't happened overnight. It's been gradual, but it has, because the days of you're the one, doing it off instinct, that's long gone. And, but at the same time, I feel like, especially in this scenario, it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if we're seeing his final days as manager there, because it almost feels this whole season just feels like it's just a countdown to the finish line, and then some drastic moves are going to be made. That's the hunch I get. I'm not saying for sure, but that's the hunch I get, and he, could be one of them. And it's unfortunate because he's had a longer run than any of them, with this team, and it just never. The shame of it was it never at the beginning of his run got the chance to really see what it could have been. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe not I don't know. I don't think that team maybe would have necessarily won a World Series, but it could have been something. Had what happened to Jose not happened, it could have been a playoff team. I still firmly believe that next season they were going to have a very good shot at least being a playoff team, and it would have been fun to watch. But it never materialized, and since then it's just been an impossible uphill battle for the past 4 years now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it has. And as you said, the countdown's on. We are a month from the time of us recording this will be the season finale. And then, as Andre said, and I've been feeling the same for a good few weeks now, probably going to be expecting a lot to be happening from October 6th shortly on. And we'll touch into more of that next week. That's going to be it for this week's episode of Fish Bytes. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. I'm going to try to go get a cheesesteak or 2 or 12 while I'm here for 3.5 days.
Not 12. Come on. You need to survive these last 30 days of the season.
No, I won't be 12.
And what's coming after.
And what's coming after, exactly. But yeah that's
going
to be
it
for
us. For football, my friend. So don't hurt yourself.
Football? What's that?
Oh, you'll remember. So you'll remember quickly in October.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll be back next week.